Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would yield 2.5 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from Kentucky and the co-chair, of the Second Amendment Caucus, Mr. Massie.
Gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, Democrats today want to introduce gun control legislation that they say is going to make you safer. They want to expand background checks. But what do background checks accomplish? Well, the DOJ said there were 112,000 denials in a year. Who were those 112,000 people? Well, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle would have you think those were felons. They saved you from those felons. But how many of those 112,000 were prosecuted for that crime of trying to acquire that gun? According to the DOJ, 12. 1, 2, 12 in a year. Who were the other 100,000? Imagine, just imagine now, that you're the victim of an abusive relationship, and after 5 years, you've summoned the courage and the resources to separate from that relationship. But things have escalated, and now you've decided it's time to acquire the means to protect you and your children. So you go to the gun store and you try to buy a gun. The clerk presses the computer button. It says denied. You ask the clerk, why was it denied? I don't know, this happens sometimes. Maybe you had a similar name to somebody else in the database. You can't buy a gun today, tomorrow, next week, not ever. You've been denied. So you go to a friend you've known for a long time. Your friend says, I'd like to help you. You say, well, I don't know if I'm going to make it through the night. The friend says, I'd like to help you, but don't you know H.R. 8 passed, and it was signed by the president. I can't spend a year in a cage. Good luck tonight. Now, I'm not going to ask you to imagine what happens next, because the Democrats saw fit to put into this bill a requirement that you have an imminent threat of death. The threat has to be right there upon you, or great bodily harm. What are they saying? Well, if you're just expecting a few bruises and maybe a punch, put some ice on it. I'm going to ask my colleagues here today, I'm going to challenge the sponsors of this bill, and those of you who might think you would vote for this bill, to consider whether it's fair. Is it fair to surround yourself with armed guards, with Capitol Hill police who have guns, with personal details, bodyguards, and ask the people to pay for it when you make it harder for those same people to protect themselves? I don't think that's fair. And for the fact checkers who are already hard at work on this speech, I ask unanimous consent to submit to the record this GAO report on the DOJ statistics on background checks.
Without objection.
I yield back.
Fired. The gentleman from Ohio reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 1 minute to the distinguished Majority Leader of the House, Mr. Hoyer.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Well, that's an interesting speech to follow. Mr. Massie was very energized,